The easiest way to miss a threat is to underestimate the person standing closest to it. Because arrogance has a blind spot. It assumes the people serving you are too small to notice what you're doing. That's why the owner of Millionaire felt comfortable telling a black waitress in front of a full dining room, "Get someone else," like she was a stain on his reputation. He thought he was protecting his restaurant's image. What he was actually doing was exposing his own. And if Nola James hadn't switched one glass in silence, without argument, without drama, he would have succeeded in something much worse than humiliation. He would have gotten away with a crime. Nola James had learned to be quiet without being weak. 29, black, hair tucked into a neat bun, uniform crisp, posture controlled. She moved through Millionaire like she belonged there because she did. She'd earned it, one double shift at a time. Millionaire was the kind of place where people whispered on purpose, where the lights were low and warm, and every plate arrived like a performance. The menu didn't list prices because the guests weren't supposed to care. The wine list was thick enough to be a novel. The staff was trained to disappear until needed, then appear like magic. Nola was good at the job. Too good for how she was treated sometimes. The maitre d', a white man named Lionel, respected her because she made his nights smooth. The chef respected her because she caught allergy issues before they became disasters. But the owner, Henri Dumont, saw her differently. Henri saw Nola as risk. Not because she did anything wrong, because she didn't match the image he wanted to sell. Old-world luxury, white glove service, a certain kind of clientele that liked to be surrounded by people who looked like them. Henri Dumont was a man who smiled with his mouth and judged with his eyes. He was in his 50s, always wearing a tailored jacket even when he wasn't working, always talking about standards and brand. He treated the restaurant like a stage and the staff like props. Nola had learned to avoid him. Keep her head down, do her work, collect her tips, go home. Tonight the restaurant was packed. A private room had been reserved for a high-profile dinner. 6 people, expensive suits, laughter too loud, money everywhere. Henri was hovering near that room like a proud host because the group included a local politician and a real estate developer known for throwing cash around. High spenders, high ego, high risk. Lionel assigned Nola to the private room anyway because she was the most steady server on staff. "Just be smooth," he whispered. "Henri's nervous." Nola nodded. "I'm always smooth," she said quietly. She entered the private room carrying sparkling water and wine glasses on a tray. The table was full of white men and one white woman, all dressed like they belonged in magazines. The host of the dinner, a man named Victor Sloan, was leaning back in his chair like he owned the air. He wore a sharp suit, a gold watch, and the smile of someone who enjoyed making people uncomfortable. Next to him sat his associate, a younger man in a gray suit with darting eyes, nervous energy hidden under politeness. Across from them, the politician laughed too loudly at everything Victor said. Money loved politics, and politics loved money. Nola approached with her professional smile. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome to Millionaire. May I start you with sparkling water?" Victor barely looked at her. "Wine," he said, waving a hand. "Something expensive." Nola nodded. "Of course. We have a Bordeaux." Henri appeared behind her suddenly, like he'd been waiting. "No," Henri said sharply, stepping into the room with that forced host smile. "Gentlemen, so sorry. We're going to have someone else take over." Nola blinked, confusion flickering. "I'm assigned." Henri didn't let her finish. He leaned close enough that only she could hear and hissed through his smile, "Get someone else." Then he turned to the table, louder, performing. "Apologies, my friends. Just a small adjustment." Victor smirked, finally looking at Nola like she was entertainment. "What? She not good enough?" he asked, amused. Henry's laugh was too quick. "Of course she's fine," Henry said, "but tonight we want the best." The words hit Nola like a slap because she knew what he meant. The best didn't mean skill, it meant skin. She felt heat rise in her chest, but she didn't argue. Not here, not in front of the table, because she also noticed something else while Henry performed. The nervous man in the gray suit had slipped a small vial from his pocket under the table. He held it low, hidden by the tablecloth, and his eyes flicked toward Victor's water glass. Not wine, water. Nola's pulse shifted. She'd seen enough in this job. Wealthy men making shady deals, dates going wrong, arguments in bathrooms, to know when something was off. The gray-suited man's hand trembled as he tipped the vial slightly. Henry was still talking, still smiling, still trying to erase Nola from the room. Nola's mind snapped into focus. She didn't know what was in that vial. She didn't need to. She knew one thing. If something went into that glass and the wrong person drank it, the night would end in sirens or worse. Nola didn't panic. Panic makes you visible. Visibility in moments like this gets you blamed. So she did what she had learned to do to survive. She moved like nothing was happening. She nodded politely to Henri, as if accepting dismissal. "Of course," she said softly. "I'll get someone else." Henry's shoulders relaxed slightly, pleased. Victor chuckled. The politician smiled awkwardly. The gray-suited man's hand moved again under the table. Nola turned away, tray balanced, and took 3 calm steps toward the door. Then, in one smooth motion, she pivoted back as if she'd forgotten something. "Excuse me," she said, voice light. "I just need to refresh these glasses." Before anyone could respond, she stepped to the table and began collecting the water glasses. Fast but graceful, like routine service. Her fingers were steady. Her eyes were down. Her face was neutral. The gray-suited man froze, vial still in hand. Victor lifted his eyebrows. "What are you doing?" he asked, amused. Nola smiled politely. "How standard," she said. "Fresh glass for every course." Henry stiffened. "Nola," he began sharply. Nola didn't look at him. She didn't argue. She simply swapped Victor's water glass with another identical one from her tray, silently, seamlessly, placing the new glass down exactly where the old one had been. Same coaster, same position. Then she lifted the original glass, now the target, off the table. No one noticed the switch except the gray-suited man, whose eyes widened in panic. His hand jerked back under the table, vial disappearing. Nola kept moving, collecting 2 more glasses, then turned and walked out. Her heart was pounding, but her face never changed. In the hallway, she moved quickly to the service station where Lionel stood. She set the tray down and leaned close, voice low. "Lionel," she whispered, "someone just tried to put something in a glass, in the private room." Lionel's face changed instantly. "What?" Nola slid the targeted glass toward him, careful not to touch the rim. "This one," she said. "Don't let anyone drink it. Call security." Quietly. Lionel's eyes widened as he stared at the glass, then at Nola. "Are you sure?" Nola nodded. "I saw the vial," she said, "under the table." Lionel swallowed hard. He didn't doubt her. Nola wasn't dramatic. If she said it, it was real. Lionel spoke into his headset softly. "Security to service station," he said, voice controlled. Then he looked at Nola. "Go to the back," he whispered. "Now." Nola nodded and moved toward the kitchen corridor, but she didn't leave completely. She positioned herself near the pass-through window where she could still see the private room entrance. She watched as Henry stormed out, face angry, heading straight for Lionel. Henri's voice carried even through the soft music. "What is going on?" he hissed. Lionel kept his expression neutral. "We had a concern," he said. "A safety concern." Henri scoffed. "Safety? Don't be ridiculous. This is a VIP table." Lionel's eyes hardened. "Exactly. he said, "which is why we're taking it seriously." Henri turned toward the private room as if to go back in and reassert control. But at that moment, two men in dark suits, restaurant security, arrived. One leaned toward Lionel. Lionel handed him the glass carefully. "Hold it," Lionel said quietly, "and call police. Tell them possible poisoning attempt." Henry's face went pale. "Poisoning?" he snapped, voice too loud. The security guard's eyes narrowed. "Sir," he said, "please lower your voice." Henry looked like he wanted to scream, but fear had entered his posture. In the private room, Victor was laughing about something, unaware. The gray-suited man sat rigid now, sweat visible at his hairline. Lionel stepped into the doorway, calm and professional. "Gentlemen," he said, "we need to pause service briefly. There's been an incident with glassware." Victor frowned. "What kind of incident?" Lionel's voice stayed smooth. "A safety one," he said. "Please remain seated." Victor's smile faded. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped. "Do you know who I am?" Lionel didn't blink. "Yes," he said, "and that's why we're being careful." Henry pushed forward. "This is outrageous," he hissed. "You're embarrassing us." Lionel turned slightly, eyes sharp. "We're preventing harm," he replied. Victor stood up, anger flaring. "This is some kind of setup," he said, glaring at Lionel. Then his eyes landed on Nola in the hallway, because she'd stepped closer, unable to stay hidden. Victor's mouth curled. "Oh, I get it," he sneered. "This is her. She's mad she got replaced." Henry's face tightened. "Nola, go away," he snapped. Nola's voice stayed calm, but her eyes were sharp. "I'm not mad," she said. "I'm concerned." Victor laughed, harsh. "Concerned," he repeated. "You people love playing victim." The words hit like poison on top of poison. Nola felt anger rise, but she kept her tone even. "No," she said. "I love people not dying in my restaurant." Silence. Victor's laughter stopped abruptly. The politician's face went stiff. Henri's eyes widened. "Your restaurant?" Henri snapped. Nola didn't look at him. "The restaurant where I work," she corrected, "where I don't want anyone harmed." The security guard stepped in, voice low. "Police are on the way." The gray-suited man's eyes darted toward the door. He shifted in his seat as if calculating escape. One security guard moved subtly to block the exit. Victor's face turned a shade darker. "This is insane," he said. "I'm leaving." Lionel's voice was calm but firm. "Not yet," he said. "Not until we're sure everyone is safe." Victor stared at him. "You can't detain me." Lionel didn't argue. He simply said, "We can ask you to wait." The gray-suited man made his move. He stood abruptly, chair scraping, and lunged toward the door. The security guard grabbed his arm. The man jerked violently, shouting, "Let go!" The room erupted. The politician stood, backing away. The woman at the table screamed. Victor shouted, "What the hell is he doing?" Lionel's eyes were locked on the gray-suited man. "Sir," Lionel said sharply, "stop resisting." The man's pocket bulged. The vial. In the struggle, it slipped out and clattered onto the hardwood floor, rolling under the table. Everyone saw it. Everyone. The whole story changed in 1 second. Victor froze, staring at the vial like it was a snake. "What is that?" he demanded. The gray-suited man's face twisted with panic. "Nothing," he barked. "It's nothing." Security pinned him. The police arrived moments later, 2 officers stepping into the private room with controlled urgency. Lionel pointed to the vial. One officer picked it up with gloves. The other asked, "Who does this belong to?" The gray-suited man's mouth opened. No words came. Victor's face was pale now, bravado cracking. "That's not mine," he said quickly. "I don't know what that is." The officer looked at him, then at the table, then at the security footage they'd already begun pulling from cameras. The officer's gaze shifted to Nola. "You reported it?" he asked. Nola nodded. I saw him, she said calmly. He was aiming for that water glass. Victor's eyes snapped to her. His voice was suddenly sharp with fear disguised as anger. She's lying, he said. She's a server. She wants attention. The officer didn't react. He turned to Lionel. Do you have the glass? Lionel nodded and handed over the targeted glass. Sealed. The officer examined it, then looked at the table. Nobody drank from it? Lionel shook his head. No, he said. She switched it. The officer's eyebrows lifted. She switched it? Lionel pointed subtly toward Nola. Yes, he said, in silence. The officer looked at Nola again, this time with respect. Ma'am, he said, that likely saved someone's life. Henry stood in the doorway, face pale, hands shaking slightly. He looked like a man who had been trying to control his image and had just realized his image could have been stained with death. Victor sat back down slowly, staring at his associate like he'd never seen him before. Why would you do that? Victor whispered. The gray-suited man started to cry. Not dramatic tears, but the ugly panic of someone caught. He told me, the man blurted suddenly, voice breaking. He told me to do it. The room froze. Victor's head snapped up. What? The man shook violently. He said if you got sick, the deal would die, and he could take your shares. The officer stepped forward. Say that again, he ordered. Victor's face turned to stone. He's lying, he snapped, but his voice sounded thin. The man sobbed. He promised me money, he gasped. He said it was just enough to make you pass out, just enough to scare you. The officer's eyes hardened. We'll let the lab tell us what it was, he said, but you're coming with us. They cuffed the gray-suited man. Victor stood abruptly, furious and shaken. This is insane, he barked, pointing at Nola. This is her fault. Nola's eyes held his. No, she said calmly. It's yours. The words were quiet. That's what made them brutal. Victor looked like he wanted to lunge, but the officers stepped between them. Henri, still trying to salvage control, turned sharply to Nola as if blame could restore his authority. You, he hissed, you caused a scene in front of VIPs. Nola stared at him. I prevented a tragedy, she said. Henry's face tightened. You disobeyed me, he snapped. You were told to get someone else. Nola's voice stayed even. I did, she said. I got someone else. The police. The officer glanced at Henri sharply, taking note. Henri went silent. The room was done with his performance now. The officers took statements. They reviewed footage. They escorted the gray-suited man out. Victor was questioned separately, his confidence evaporating under the calm pressure of law enforcement. The politician quietly slipped away, suddenly eager not to be associated with anything criminal. Lacey, if she'd been there, would have posted about how traumatizing it was. But tonight, nobody cared about optics. Tonight was about facts. After the police left, Maison Lier felt different. The low music continued, but the air had a new heaviness. Lionel walked to Nola near the service station. His face was tight with adrenaline. You okay? He asked. Nola exhaled slowly. Yeah, she lied, because she was shaking inside. Lionel nodded once. Henry's furious, he warned quietly. Nola's eyes hardened. Let him be, she said. Lionel looked at her with respect. You saved someone, he said. Nola's throat tightened. I did what I had to, she said. Henry stormed into the service area a few minutes later, face red with rage. Do you realize what you've done? He hissed. You humiliated me. Nola looked at him calmly. You humiliated me first, she replied. Henry's eyes widened. How dare you? Lionel stepped between them slightly. Henry, Lionel said, voice controlled, you need to calm down. Henry snapped at Lionel. Stay out of it. Then he pointed at Nola. You're done here, he spat. You're fired. The word fired hung in the air, familiar, heavy. Nola felt the sting, because even after saving lives, black women still get punished for disrupting comfort. But this time, something was different. The restaurant's general manager, Elise Verne, white woman, sharp, quiet, had walked in during the last part of the chaos. She stood in the doorway now, arms folded, eyes cold. "No," Elise said calmly. Henri whirled. "Excuse me?" Elise stepped forward. "You're not firing anyone," she said. "Not tonight. Not ever like that." Henri's face twisted. "I own this place," he snapped. Elise's expression didn't change. "You own the brand," she said. "I run the operation. And tonight, your brand almost became a crime scene." Henri's mouth opened, then closed. Elise turned to Nola. "Nola," she said, voice firm, "go take a break. Paid. I'll handle this." Nola blinked, stunned. Henri spluttered, "Elise?" Elise cut him off. "We have police reports, security footage, and multiple witnesses that you attempted to remove the one person who noticed a poisoning attempt," she said. "If you want to escalate this, Henri, you can do it with lawyers." Henri's face drained slightly. He glanced around, realizing the power shift. Lionel stood with Elise. Two other staff members stood nearby, watching. For once, Henri couldn't rely on silence. He turned sharply and left, furious. Nola stepped into the back hallway and finally let her hands shake. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Not because she wanted praise, because she'd been carrying tension like a weight, and it finally had somewhere to go. Elise found her 10 minutes later and handed her a glass of water. "Not from the dining room," Elise said dryly. Nola managed a small laugh. Elise's face softened. "You did something brave," Elise said. Nola shook her head. "I did something necessary," she replied. Elise nodded. "Most people don't," she said quietly. The next day, the story spread. Not to tabloids, because Maison Lier didn't want that, but through quiet channels. A poisoning attempt stopped, a VIP dinner interrupted, police involved. Victor Sloan's name began appearing in rumors tied to corporate sabotage and a partnership dispute. Investigators questioned him again. The gray-suited man's confession led to deeper scrutiny. Meanwhile, Henri Dumont received a formal complaint from staff through HR, something that had never happened before because people were scared. Now they weren't as scared, because they'd seen what Nola did and how the truth held. Elise documented Henri's discriminatory instruction, "Get someone else," and filed it as part of a workplace conduct report. She also sent Nola's actions up the chain to corporate partners who helped finance Maison Lier's expansion. Because money listens when risk is involved, and Henri had become risk. A week later, Henri was no longer hands-on. He still owned shares, but he was removed from daily operations by the investors who didn't want their investment associated with scandal and discrimination. The official statement said restructuring. The staff called it consequences. Nola didn't celebrate. She came to work, did her job, and carried herself with the quiet certainty of someone who knows she saved a life, even if the room never says thank you properly. But the room did change. Guests started noticing her competence. Staff stopped treating her like disposable. Lionel started assigning her to higher-profile tables because he trusted her judgment. And one night, as Nola polished wine glasses before service, Elise approached with paperwork. "We're promoting you to lead server," Elise said simply. Nola blinked. "Me?" Elise nodded. "You're observant," she said. "You're calm under pressure. You care about safety. Those are leadership traits." Nola's throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. Elise held her gaze. "Also," Elise added, "I'm sorry you were ever treated like you didn't belong here." Nola looked down, then back up, eyes shining. "I always belonged," she said quietly. Elise nodded. "Yes," she said. "You did." The good ending wasn't that a racist owner got embarrassed. The good ending was that a black waitress trusted her instincts, stayed composed, and protected people who would have ignored her until it was too late. The good ending was that her silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Because sometimes the smartest move isn't to argue with someone who disrespects you. Sometimes the smartest move is to switch the glass, save the room, and let the truth arrive with handcuffs.